In the fading light of the 1860s, when brother fought against brother and a nation struggled to define itself, thousands of young men gazed into the lens of the camera, unaware that their silent portraits would one day become the only trace of their existence. These are the forgotten faces of the Confederacy, fathers, sons, and friends, captured not in motion, but in stillness. Their uniforms are worn, their eyes steady, their expressions filled with a quiet determination that time could never erase. For more than 160 years, their images remain frozen in black and white, relics of a divided nation. But now, through the power of modern restoration and colorization, their humanity returns. Look closer, and you'll see more than uniforms and buttons. You'll see life itself, a spark of youth in their eyes, a trace of fatigue in their posture, the subtle warmth of skin once touched by southern sun and dust. This isn't just a glimpse into history. It's a journey across time. Through each color, each restored detail, we reconnect with the souls who lived through one of the most defining chapters of America's past. Welcome to Civil War Memories in Color. Private John W. Matthews, Ben Hill Volunteers, Company F, 21st Georgia Infantry. Matthews enlisted on July 9, 1861 in Antioch, Georgia. He was slightly wounded on May 2, 1863 at the Battle of Chancellorsville, Virginia, but soon returned to his regiment. He contracted syphilis late in 1864 and was absent for basically the remainder of the war due to the disease. Second Lieutenant John Pinckney Osborne, Hiwassee Volunteers, Company D, 24th Georgia Infantry. Osborne enlisted as a private on August 24, 1861 in Towns County, and was later elected second lieutenant. He was killed at the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863. First Lieutenant Lewis Pinckney Brooks, Company B, 7th Georgia Infantry. Brooks enlisted as a private on May 31, 1862 in Atlanta, Georgia, and eventually became a first lieutenant. He suffered several absences due to illness until he was wounded in May 1864 during the Battle of Spotsylvania, suffering a wound to the hip. Toward the end of the war, he was listed as absent on wounded furlough. He survived the war, moved to Texas, and died there in Young County in 1931. Second Corporal Cincinnati C. Wilson, Coweta Guards, Company A, 7th Georgia Infantry. Wilson enlisted as a private on July 30th, 1861 in Newnan, Georgia, later being promoted to corporal. He was absent with pneumonia for a time in 1862. He was killed during the Battle of Knoxville, Tennessee on December 4th, 1863. Corporal William L. Edwards and Sergeant James Monroe Edwards, Company K, 12th Georgia Cavalry. The brothers enlisted on August 15th, 1862 in Ringgold, Georgia. William was listed as absent wounded in August 1864, but no particulars were made as to where he was wounded. He survived the war, died in 1899, and is buried in Catoosa County, Georgia. William's death was very tragic. Riding a horse and buggy, he was either thrown or fell from the buggy. He must have been knocked out from the fall as he was lying flat, and as a result, he drowned in just 6 inches of water standing on the roadside. James was wounded on September 19th, 1863, during the Battle of Chickamauga. He was wounded yet again in 1864 during the Atlanta Campaign, and wounded yet a third time in April 1865 at Bentonville, North Carolina. James died in 1925 and is buried in Catoosa County, Georgia. Private Samuel Lawson McNair, Company B, 53rd Georgia Infantry, and Company E, 42nd Georgia Infantry. McNair enlisted on May 1st, 1862 in Newton County in the 52nd Georgia, but was transferred to the 42nd Georgia on November 8, 1863. He was wounded on March 14, 1865 at Kinston, North Carolina, suffering a wound to the left thigh. He was captured on April 13, 1865 in Raleigh, North Carolina, ending the war for him. First Lieutenant John Clark Varner, Company D, 6th Georgia Infantry. Varner enlisted in 1861 in Butts County as a first sergeant and eventually became lieutenant. He was wounded on June 27, 1862 at the Battle of Gaines Mill, Virginia. In 1863, he resigned his commission from the military 3rd Corporal John William Barrett, Franklin Volunteers, Company G, 7th Georgia Infantry. Barrett enlisted on July 30th, 1861 in Franklin, Georgia. He was wounded on June 28, 1862 during the 7 Days Campaign. In March 1864, he was sent to the hospital sick. Later records show him as being absent without leave. Captain John Arthur McGregor, Stevens Infantry, Company E, 17th Georgia Infantry. McGregor had served in the Mexican War as a sergeant in Company C of the 1st Georgia Infantry. When the war started, he formed this company and was elected captain. From September until December 1862, he actually served as the acting regimental commander. He was wounded in the left arm on July 2nd, 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg. Sent home to recuperate, he resigned his commission in 1864. He died in 1902 and is buried in Baker County, Georgia. Private Thomas Reuben Moore, Company F, 16th Georgia Infantry. Moore enlisted on July 19, 1861. He was mortally wounded at the Battle of Crampton's Gap during the Maryland Campaign. He suffered wounds to the face, body, and thighs and was likewise captured. He died as a result of his wounds on October 20th, 1862. Private Benjamin F. Moore, Company G, 42nd Georgia Infantry. Moore enlisted on March 4th, 1862 and served as a musician. He became a POW in July 1863 when Vicksburg, Mississippi capitulated to federal forces, but he was soon paroled. He served until the end, surrendering in North Carolina in 1865. Private Babel Jackson Rutherford, Company I, 50th Georgia Infantry. Rutherford enlisted on August 23, 1862 in Berrien County, Georgia. He was detailed for some time to work as a shoemaker in Columbus, Georgia. He was surrendered on April 9, 1865 at Appomattox. Rutherford died on June 5, 1882 in Berrien County. Private Samuel Allen Graves, Company C, 26th Georgia Infantry. Graves enlisted on July 23, 1861 in Quitman, Georgia. He was captured near Strasburg, Virginia on September 23, 1864, and was held as a POW until June 1865. Graves died in 1885 and is buried in Quitman, Brooks County, Georgia. Lieutenant John W. Huey, Company B, 54th Georgia Infantry. Huey, born in Tattnall County, Georgia, enlisted on April 21, 1861. He first served in the 2nd Georgia State Troops before his service in the 54th Georgia. It appears he was at home on furlough when the war ended. Huey died in 1916 in Savannah, Georgia, and is buried in Tattnall County. Private John Wesley Tillman left and Private Joel Dorsey Tillman, Company I, 32nd Georgia Infantry. John enlisted on May 7, 1862 in Savannah, Georgia. He had previously served as a musician in Company I, 6th Regiment Georgia State Troops. He served until the end and was surrendered in North Carolina in 1865. Joel likewise served in Company I, 6th Regiment Georgia State Troops before serving in the 32nd. He served until the end and died in 1927. Colonel George P. Harrison, Jr., 32nd Georgia Infantry. Harrison, educated at Georgia Military Institute, was appointed colonel in October 1862. He was captured on December 13, 1864 at Fort McAllister, Georgia. The regiment fought in South Carolina, North Carolina, and in Florida. Harrison's parole was included in the surrender in North Carolina in 1865. After the war, he moved to Alabama where he worked as a lawyer and as an Alabama senator. Private Jonathan Mooney, Company K, 66th Georgia Infantry. Mooney entered the military in Hall County, Georgia on August 18, 1863. In a weird twist of fate, on September 2, 1864, he was captured and became a POW while on his way home after deserting the Confederate Army. He contracted diarrhea and died while being held as a POW on September 27, 1864. Major Robert N. Hull, 66th Georgia Infantry. Hull enlisted on August 5, 1861, as a second lieutenant in Company B, 26th Georgia Infantry. He mustered out in 1862 and became a drill master for a time. He then became captain of Company A, 66th Georgia Infantry, and was later promoted to major. He was wounded in July 1864 during the Atlanta Campaign, wounded yet again on November 30th. 1864 at the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee. Hull was mortally wounded at Binneker's Bridge, South Carolina on February 9, 1865, covering a Confederate retreat. He was shot in the head, captured, and died as a result of his wounds 2 hours later. Private Alfred D. Granger, Company B, 32nd Georgia Infantry. Granger first enlisted as a private in Company B, 6th Regiment Georgia State Troops on October 18, 1861. On April 18, 1862, he enlisted in the 32nd Georgia after his enlistment in the 6th was completed. Like many soldiers, he suffered absence due to illness, and he also served as provost guard for a time. He was surrendered in North Carolina in 1865. If you found meaning in these forgotten faces, consider subscribing to preserve more moments like this, where the past breeds again.